Hi all, Bryce Roberts here, VP of Marketing at Logicbroker. Growth isn't dead, it's moving. Discovery is fragmenting across search, marketplaces, retail media, social, and emerging AI-led services, and returns are getting harder to predict. Today we're focused on where growth still works, what's structurally changing, and how Agentic Commerce rewires the mechanics behind discovery and conversion. I'm joined by the famous Steve Norris, Chief Customer Officer at Logicbroker. Steve, great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. I think famous might be an overstatement. I can't wait to see my wife's eyes roll when she hears this podcast. I think the only thing I'm famous for around here is forgetting to take the trash out, but thanks for having me.
Oh, and that's what I was referring to, by the way.
Oh,
So, you're famously bad about doing that. But you're also famously talking to tons of brands and retailers across the board during this big shift that's happening in real time. So before we dive into the tactics, if you could set the stage, what's the biggest misconception that leaders have about growth and discovery right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception that I continue to hear when I am in front of executives at large retailers and merchants is that discovery and growth is something you buy versus something that you earn and kind of maintain over time. Right? I think a lot of times what I'm seeing is when I hear people say growth is dead, which I've heard a couple people say, I think what they're really referring to is they're 9 times out of 10, when you dig into what they're talking about, they're used to putting $1 into the paid search machine or the retail media machine or the social media machine, and they get $12 back every time. Now they're putting that $1 in, they're getting $8 back, and they don't know what to do, right? So they either think about should I put another $1 in and just try to shout maybe a little bit louder? Or is something really changing, right? And that's something that really is changing feels like a lot of these LLMs, whether those are Gemini, Perplexity, ChatGPT, or others, are where a lot of folks are starting that product discovery journey now. And they're trying to understand what is it really going to take to win that agentic shopper. And historically, product discovery is always followed is almost like electricity, right? It always kind of follows the path of least resistance. So I think back to the biggest misconception, I think it's that people believe that growth is something you buy and not something that you earn and maintain over time.
Incredible. Yeah, we're going to get into that quite a bit. When we think about discovery, to your point, to the prior paradigm, if you will, used to be optimize SEO, rebuild your website, get a new e-commerce engine, go after new paid media channels, drive things that way. Now it's distributed, and every surface has sort of their own economics and some nuances that we'll dive into. So if we could take a step back and paint this into 3 buckets, where do you think growth is still durable? Where does it work, but it's being taxed, to your point of growth is dead, maybe an overreaction of the taxing of certain channels? And where are these emerging places where it's now growing, it's now possible, but it feels a little bit messy?
Yeah, I think where people are finding durable growth and where they're building equity, right, is in actually the very boring stuff, right? It's capturing more first-party data. It's finding more products that your customers crave. It's having a really compelling loyalty experience. It's having a great subscription service. It's providing awesome customer service. It's being able to have excellent operations. And those are all things that when you do are compounding assets for a brand, right? There's other really boring stuff that I think people will also find that they're building equity in. And that's around things like inventory accuracy, making sure you have relevant product content, you have clear value propositions to your customers, and really excellent performance around fulfillment. Those tend to be areas that tend to be durable and last throughout time, right? I think where things are starting to get more highly taxed, and I equivalent this to paying rent, right? The rent continues to go up if you're renting an apartment or a house, right? These are areas like paid search and social, right? These tend to move the needle, but leaders kind of feel like there are repercussions in the cost of customer acquisition in these channels because there's a lot of saturation in those channels. We're in a very mature e-commerce era where there is a lot of people battling for the same keywords, for the same eyeballs, for the same demand, and the cost of attracting that demand keeps getting higher and higher with lower results. I think other areas where people are maybe paying rent is in things like retail media, right? Where there are folks that like some of these channels where you're buying retail media are great areas where you can capture demand from a business perspective. In talking with some retailers, even over the last week, they see by the time that they spend money to be in those channels and spend money on the ads and the fees that are involved in it and the promotional activity, it's very hard for them to really be able to see the results that they would expect from those channels. And like lastly, and Bryce, you're familiar with this from a marketing perspective, it's SEO. It's really tough out there right now. I was just reading a report recently that said 60% of Google searches in 2025 resulted in no click. So this battle to be in like the top 5 links or the top 10 links matters a lot less when the first third of the page is the AI summary. The other 2/3 of the first page are paid search results, and then there's very few of those kind of blue links left at the end. So I think those are areas where people are fundamentally getting taxed. What's emerging and messy, right? These are probably areas where people are starting to figure out that they could go maybe grab some new land in, right? And it's these AI-led surfaces, right? These LLMs, these agents, right? There's a whole discipline that's being established around how do you meet a customer that is just going to ask a question or provide a prompt and then get a result back versus kind of your traditional search, click, buy path, right? I think early data is showing us that this referral traffic from these LLMs are converting, in some cases I've seen like 4 times higher than traditional search, right? And if you listen to Gartner, they put out this like seemingly unfathomable statistic that they expect like this LLM native search is going to surpass actually Google search by 2030, which seems incredible. Truth be told, it's a little messy, right? Like there's not an exact playbook that's been established that you can follow to be successful in these channels, right? These channels didn't exist a year ago, right? We know they look a lot less like ranking number 1. We know they look a little bit more like how do I be the most trusted and best option for a customer and for this prompt at this point in time. But there's no like the playbook is kind of like in the middle of being written. It kind of feels like 2008, like the Apple App Store, right? Where people were like, oh, feels like it's going to be really big, but how do I participate in it? What does it look like is still a little bit unclear.
Yep. Love the time travel. Yeah, it's easy to look back on things now and say, well, of course it was going to be big, but at that time, who knows? And so love the characterization. What I'm hearing is the non-sexy stuff is the boring stuff is durable. The fun kind of tried and true stuff is now being heavily taxed. And maybe the overhyped to some degree, or the thing that is on everyone's mind, if only it could be so nice that it was so easy to plug into and just get going and crush and replace some of these highly taxed channels and just run with it. But it's messy and it's new and we're writing the playbook as we go. And so to that maybe middle column, a little bit into the third column, what kind of KPIs are people seeing the suffering on? I know attribution, look, the life of an e-commerce marketer, merchandiser, CDO is never easy, and so they may not realize all the signals all the way through. But is it cost to acquire customer? Is it conversion rate? Is it ROI? What are the sort of canaries in the coal mine for those heavily taxed channels that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think like generally when I like to listen to podcasts, I always like something I can kind of take away and immediately do. Right. So if you're a marketing executive right now, if you're an e-commerce executive, I would really look at your blended cost of customer acquisition. Right. If you're looking at that and you're saying, if you're comparing that to your conversion rates and you're seeing that higher cost of customer acquisition is moving up and your conversion rates haven't fallen dramatically, then that would tell you that hey, there's still demand out there. They may just be in the channels that you don't currently participate in.
I see. Very well said. And so growth is distributed. The economics are changing. So let's talk about the system shift, accelerating Agentic Commerce. So people hear agents and they think it's a new interface, it's a new channel, maybe just kind of approach it like some of the other additional channels that people could have done, but it just feels systematically very, very different. And so could you explain it in the context of growth and why this new frontier is very different from prior sort of incremental channels that people could plug into for discovery or growth.
Yeah, I think we got to go back a little bit to what's changed, right? Like, I think people have, sometimes we look at things online and say, hey, shopping online is very convenient. You just search for something, you click on it, and you buy it, right? But over the last 5 or 10 years, actually online shopping, I would argue, has not been all that convenient, right? It's been very convenient in order to be able to find inspiration. There's more ways than ever to get inspired to do something, but it's actually harder to be able to execute on that shopping experience, right? You might get inspired on TikTok to run. You might go to Google and say, hey, I'm looking for what's the best pair of running shoes to run a half a marathon. And then you'll get a list. You'll take a look at that list. Maybe you triage that list with Reddit to say, hey, do actually running aficionados or enthusiasts like these shoes? And you're doing all of this research, and then you're trying to find where specifically do I buy this, right? That's a lot of steps to go through. That's a lot of mechanics that somebody has to go through to simply buy a pair of running shoes, right? And it's because there's all these different channels and places people go to understand product quality, reviews, what people are saying about particular products. Then Agentic Commerce steps forward, right? And now all of a sudden, all you need to do if you're looking for said running shoes is say, hey, find me a size 13 running shoe under $150 with great arch support that can be delivered to me next week. And all of a sudden, here are 3 to 5 options that I can go and buy. So what's happened is that whole funnel has gotten collapsed. Now you're just saying, here's the prompt and here's the answer versus this whole maze of things that customers need to go through in order to figure out what is the best pair of running shoes for them. Like, fundamentally, when you think about it from a technology perspective, when I say, hey, find me a size 13 running shoe under $150 with great arch support that can be there next week, what the agent or the LLM is doing is it's taking that prompt and it's breaking it down into structured constraints, right? Size 13, under $150, great arch support, can be there next week, right? And then that agent is doing that comparison shopping for me based on the context that it understands that I've given it in the individual prompt, or even throughout an entire conversation that I may have had with that agent about running. In order to participate in that, though, there's a completely different mindset shift that brands and merchants need to be thinking about because they've optimized their PDP, their product display page, for the last 20 years for Bryce, you and I to be able to go out and see how great their website looks, right? And inspire us to buy from them. But like the agents don't care about what your PDP looks like. They care about your ability to be able to answer the question that the shopper is asking of you, right? So what do you need to be able to do that? Well, one, you got to have all of the context around the products that you're selling, right? You're only able to answer these questions if you provide the appropriate context. You can't show up in an answer about size 13 running shoes under $150 with great arch support if you're not specifically telling these LLMs that these shoes have great arch support. So now you're optimizing not for keyword search like running shoe, you're optimizing for what are the possible permutations of questions that people could ask that would lead them to this particular product. And that means you need to not only create that content, but be able to syndicate that content directly up to the agents so they even know that you exist, right? Now, certainly we've seen early attempts by some of the LLMs to do things like screen scraping, which has led to like missed variants, products that are out of stock, getting linked over to the wrong product. You certainly don't want to have that experience for a first-time shopper of your products, right? So you have to have that data in a structured way, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's machine readable so that you can syndicate that product information and your inventory up to the LLMs to even be included in that list of 3 to 5 options. Like in these agentic commerce experiences, there's not like this infinite scroll list today of plausible possibilities. It's like, here's 3 to 5 options, make your decision, right? So the agent lets the shopper decide which of those three options they want to pick, or ask more questions to kind of refine the prompt, refine the search. And then what is happening is these LLMs and agents are using these low latency integrations to merchants in order to be able to facilitate things like pricing and promotions, be able to facilitate things like shipping and tax. And they expect that those, and even sometimes even the payment token, they expect those to be done in real time. What people I don't think understand necessarily is that these agents are monitoring the quality of the data and how quickly you can communicate with them. So if it takes a long time for you to be able to return them what the shipping offers are and what the tax amounts are for that particular product, you're just going to get deprioritized the next time around, right? So there's a lot of this stuff that used to be kind of, like I was saying earlier, boring, that are really important in this next area of commerce, because you as the merchant own that entire experience from a customer perspective, right? Like, it's your responsibility to make sure that those products are easily found by your customers. It's your responsibility to handle kind of the post-purchase messaging. It's your responsibility to handle customer service. It's your responsibility to handle returns. That's like when I was talking about earlier and I said, hey, where is there compounding assets in this? A lot of it is in doing the things that maybe you already do well better.
Yeah. You laid out really clearly of sort of the pre-world paradigm versus the post-world paradigm, to that point of brands that just, we used to think about it so linearly of here's the customer experience, here's how the site's going to look, here's our branding, the usability, the UX components. And now we have agents, aka bots, running around, sucking up all kinds of information, looking for things, not even on the front end of your site, but through other means, through other systems, and finding it. And it feels a little bit like that one time when Google had a massive SEO update and they kind of penalized you for bad usability or bad site speed and things like that, where it became more about the true usability and less about like just, oh, you filled out all the meta tags and you like wrote all these things. It's almost a little bit of the inverse, but this shift of going to the key information of how would a buyer experience the purchase and what are all the pertinent information. So you really have to have your operational game on point for that. If we could zoom out a bit, like in this new world, how do you think agents are either going to reinforce brand power, moats, this kind of dominion that the key brands have, versus a bit of democratizing it or even commoditizing on your brand power?
There is a lot of people that are concerned right now about the possibility of their brand being commoditized and shoppers just landing on whatever the cheapest product is that fits their needs, right? I actually don't think that that's a risk, right? I think that the exact opposite is actually true. I think these agents allow you to be able to enforce your brand power and value propositions, right? If you can clearly signal to these agents your unique value proposition, things like maybe sustainability, things like being eco-friendly, things like sturdiness or warranty or great loyalty program. These are things that these agents will prioritize when people ask these very specific brand-driven questions, right? And by you being able to control your brand in that manner, the agents are going to have enough context to be able to recommend you in more scenarios, right? Now, that doesn't mean that no one's going to get commoditized in this. I think the people that will get commoditized in this are like people that are selling just the same SKU as everybody else, that have just like average levels of customer service and delivery experience. But you would argue that those are commoditized across the internet anyway. Like selling the same stuff everybody else is going to put you in a commoditized position, whether this is agentic commerce or it's just traditional e-commerce, right? In the agentic world, like your real brand now is oddly like how the model's scoring you, and is a function of how well formatted your data is and your overall delivery experience.
Yep, that makes total sense. And so what should folks be doing? Like if they're feeling really taxed, if they're not aware of how durable the durable growth channels are, if they're feeling super taxed and under pressure on the tax categories, and if this feels messy, how would you encourage them to go forward? Like what types of systems should they be transacting with? how should they get their house in order to best exploit the shift here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? I try to think about like what are the couple things that you could do, because as soon as you start focusing on like 100 different things, you're going to get lost, right? And you're going to lose focus and you're not going to be able to deliver on the expectations, right? So I tend to group this into kind of two, maybe three categories, right? The first thing you got to think about is, do you have the structured content that you need to be able to support the questions that your customers are asking in these channels, right? Do you have enough content on your PDP or enough information being syndicated up to these LLMs that you can actually be identified and discoverable in these particular channels? Oftentimes this means maybe some optimization around like these kind of traditional acronyms you'd hear like GEO or AEO. And sometimes there are capabilities that are out there in the market that allow people to be able to secure a platform that would help more easily generate some of those types of descriptions. So I think that's one, right? Like get your data structures in order. I think secondarily, there's a renewed focus that needs to be placed on how you integrate and participate in these platforms in a low latency, easy way, right? I think the key here is, how do you make sure you put in a platform that makes it easy for you to be able to participate in these agentic channels, whether that's one channel or many, and how do you make sure you have the orchestration capabilities that allow you to be able to appropriately reflect things like expected ship date and delivery date? How do you make sure you have the best offer when it comes to shipping speed and shipping costs for the customers? I think that orchestration and integration engine becomes really, really helpful there. And then I think lastly, it's about how do you make sure that you have real-time exposure to a lot of this data as it changes, right? How do you make sure that inventory availability is constantly in sync with the LLMs? How do you make sure that you're in a position where when somebody transacts on these LLMs, whether that's through ChatGPT Instant Checkout or Perplexity Buy with Pro or Copilot Shopping, that you're in the best position to deliver a really awesome customer experience?
Yep, it's well said. And so as folks look at this, we talked about the blended CAC, being a great sign. When folks look for warning signs or where to invest in, are there other signals, or are there other just trying to spur people on and really get them a sense of urgency? I know some folks feel a little bit of a wait and see mentality of like, we'll see how this all turns out. But I feel like the danger is building, the risks are building day by day, and probably they should have a sense of what's going to spur them on.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you can do immediately, we talked a little bit earlier about looking at CAC. One of the things you can do immediately is look at how much of your referral traffic is coming from these AI, LLM, and agent sources, right? When you start to understand that, that can help you build out a plan of attack around those types of experiences. Like for instance, if you looked at your traffic today, there are retailers that have reported to me that up to 20% of their inbound traffic are coming from LLM sources versus traditional kind of search, right? If you look at that and you use that as a benchmark, right, that might be the extreme on one side of it. But somebody that's seeing that kind of volume, whether that's 10% to 20%, is getting found on these LLMs. So then you want to think about like, how do you become shoppable on there to take a step out of the process for your customer, making it easier to transact? If you look at the flow of traffic to your website today and you see it's 1% or 0.5% from these LLMs, that's probably actually telling you that you're in more of a risk point, right? Because if your competitors are saying, hey, we're 5 to 10% or even up to 20% referral traffic, then there's something wrong with how you're appearing in those channels that probably needs to be addressed sooner rather than later, because that means you're not showing up in any of these searches. So you're not even a part of that 3 to 5 consideration set at all, right? And you may not even be cited in some of the expert level questions that might be asked. So I think that's kind of a key area that people can dig into.
Yeah. Maybe that's the catch-22. It's like, oh, I'm not seeing any LLM traffic coming to the site, so why should we invest in that? Well, that may be a bad thing that you're not getting that traffic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then you could look into it. Okay. This has been an amazing conversation, talking about growth and discovery, recapping sort of prior paradigms to now, what is still durable, what is under stress for a lot of folks, and what a lot of people are talking about and people want to move towards, but is still messy and still the book has yet to be written across many aspects. And so hopefully we gave some folks some just really good direction and your perspectives of talking to brands, retailers, merchants day in, day out, and feed that to folks. So Steve, if you're ready, I would love to enter the lightning round with you at this point.
Okay, yeah, let's go.
All right, let's go. All right, and all your answers are very well informed and very comprehensive. We're gonna try and make this as fast as possible. What are 3 no regrets moves leaders should make in the next 6 to 12 months?
I think when you think about what could you do, right? No regrets moves. It's looking and making sure your data is clean and structured for these agents to be able to consume. It's about making sure you got an orchestration layer and an integration layer in place that you can light up some of these new platforms pretty quickly without a monolithic technology lift or bespoke project inside your company. And I think the third one is probably making sure that you have the ability to be able to expose the data that's required for these agents to be able to transact.
Great. What's the first operational change you'd make to become agent ready for growth?
Oh man, I love this one. I talk about this a lot with folks. Here's what you can immediately do. Pick one high value category that you have from your business and make it agent ready. Take it end to end. Make sure you have the data structured the right way. Make sure you know that you're going to be able to provide reliable fulfillment around those products. Don't start with products that are commonly out of stock. Make sure you've tested the integrations that are in place and just do that for one high value category and see what the level of effort it takes to do that is, see what the results will be, use that to inform how you do the rest.
Love it. Feed the agents your highlight reel, and the rest flows from there.
Exactly.
What should commerce teams start measuring now that they probably aren't?
That's a great question, right? I think people are starting to talk about share of voice when it comes to these LLMs, and am I appearing in the questions that I would expect to appear? That could be interesting. It's a little rough right now to be able to calculate those types of things, but that could be really interesting. I think it's how quickly can I light up a new agentic channel is probably a question, like a KPI that people could start measuring, and how complete is my data to even be able to participate in some of these channels. I think those are probably the 3 key ones.
Love that. And to finish this round out, but to key exactly in on what you just said, what's the biggest trap as folks try to key in to that first AI agentic LLM channel? What traps do they fall into?
Oh man, this is really interesting. I think sometimes I'm seeing a situation where people are trying to put racing stripes on a car with no engine, right? People are trying to run into these agentic channels to create kind of like this highlight or headline reel, right? Which looks great at the time, right? It generates a lot of excitement, right? And we're seeing a lot of excitement around that. But then the plumbing isn't there to be able to support that channel as it continues to grow. So I think that's a common trap people end up in.
Love it. All right. Well, with that racing car analogy, let's shift gears a little bit. Love the conversation. I just want to make everyone aware, Connected Commerce is coming up on May 7th in New York City. If you like this conversation, this is part of the sets of content and part of the focus of what we're going to be talking about with the Agentic Shift for Connected Commerce on May 7th in New York City with Steve and many other famous folks that are going to be there. And we'd love to have you come on. We have a landing page for it. We'd love for you to spread the word and for you to join us with even more peer-to-peer, behind closed doors, private conversations, stuff that retailers all think and know but don't want to always say publicly. Less hype, more real peer-to-peer conversations at Connected Commerce. Steve, any comments on that?
No, hope to see everybody there.
All right. Thanks so much, Steve. Really appreciated the conversation today.